Thank you very much. No, this is wonderful. This is amazing. We can move on to our next question. Many of your written works have been published and gone viral. And how does writing contribute to your overall artistic expression? And what themes or messages are central to your written pieces?
Yeah, thank you. Again, superb questions, guys. I think that so writing is something that I didn't come super naturally to me. I definitely like have some dyslexia going on, and also was not that interested in writing as a form of self-expression when I was younger. I never kept a journal. I never whatever. I've always been the comedian who writes things in their head. So I have these infinite stories and inner monologues about things kind of always going in my brain. And so I was always a very storytelling kind of kid. And grew up around being told native stories. Again, I did not know the identity of storytelling as a thing, but it's just something that I grew up with, and I know lots of stories. And so, writing and storytelling are not all writing is storytelling, right? But all storytelling can become writing. But the beauty about storytelling as Native people did it as a way of transference of knowledge and understanding, and not just metaphors and whatever, but ways of expressing identity and cultural knowledge, from how to make a canoe to how to be good to your neighbor, and to how to know when to plant the right corn at the right time because of the stars. These stories contain all that knowledge, right? Writing is somewhat antithetical to that in a weird way. I put in my comedy bio recently that I'm an anti-intellectual because my ancestors were mad smart but did not write. Not in the way that we understand it. They painted, they told stories, they made songs, and those things were not writing in the way that we're taught. And so as someone who became extremely good at writing because you had to if you want to go to college and you want to survive in this white world, right? I became better than my dad taught me, and my family, you have to be better, right? To get accepted in this society because you're Native and you're going to have to push up against this world. You got to be better at writing. You got to be better at speaking and all these things. And so I got really good at writing. But in college, I realized that the writing that I was making wasn't how I talk. It wasn't how I actually express myself. It was just efficient and in the style of academia / Western writing. And I was like, why don't I write the way that I think and speak? And so I started experimenting with that, and in my college essays and stuff like that. And sometimes it would work and people would be like, wow, this is incredible. And sometimes it'd be like, you did not follow the assignment at all. And I'd be like, I know. I think your assignment is stupid. I reject it. And so I think that, again, as an expression of freedom of myself, I have made a decision that when I'm writing from my point of view, I write the way that I write. I write the way that I talk. And so I think that hopefully when you read my things, you can very clearly hear my voice is my hope. And, so I started writing fiction as a sort of way to process trauma, not when I was around that same time in college. And a lot of that, one day I'm planning on publishing some things. I have this, you'll be the first people outside of my family and friends to hear this, but I have this series of kind of short story poem things called to be read in the event of my death by, and then it has different things. Because and some of them are very silly. Some of them are to be read in the event of my death by lightning strike, to be read in the event of my death by whatever. And I just write all these different things. And it became this way that I processed both the very cynical nature that I had at that time. I was a very traumatized kid, and I think in the closet at the time when I started writing that, and just didn't know how to process a lot of the things that happened to me and things that happened to my family and to Native people and keep happening. And so I started writing like these very kind of like dark, sardonic, very like similar to my comedy, like talk about genocide with a smile kind of thing, like in a laugh, but very dark themes as a way to express my inner world. And one day I am going to release those things. At the time, I didn't know because I used to struggle with suicide a lot, and I will very happily say that during the pandemic, I had some really profound things happen to me, and I love being alive. I'm another reason that my artist name is There's More is because after choosing to live, I realized that there's always more to life. Like there's a sunrise. Like this is the poem that I wrote. It's called "The Cure to Sadness," and it starts off with "Go watch a sunrise, watch a sunset. Remember that you're alive." I have that posted on my Instagram somewhere. But you know, I like began to realize that there's just so much more in this world. There's a sunrise every day, and I've not just seen one that I don't like, and I've started to change my writing a little bit to express joy and love. And so through that came like me writing erotic, native, queer fiction, that's like really like landbacky, because I realized too, like I was trying to find native erotica to read at a variety show, and I couldn't find any that wasn't written by a white person, and or was like like those romantic novels with those jacked native dudes, like Half Breed, Comanche Warrior, whatever it is. And so I was like, okay, I got to write something. And so I wrote these pieces about the characters are Tuesday Adams, who is Wednesday Adams, right? And so Tuesday Adams will burn your village down one day before Wednesday, and then and water. And so this was shortly after Standing Rock, and I was like, what, let's create this narrative, these two queer native people and what their life might be like. And through that, like I found they're so funny. They're funny, and I can't erotic, but they're also really funny, and they're also very like much about land back and much about because and you can actually see this because right now I have an erotic installation of all native art at Vermilion Art Gallery for Native Heritage Month, because it's just a thing that I wanted to do and I haven't seen it. And on one of our posters it says, "Sure, sex is great, but have you ever had land back?" And that's from one of the stories that I wrote. And yeah, I'm not sure if this is like a direct answer to your original question, but it is like, again, like it fits into the narrative of all these tools that I have. I try to push myself. I try to push myself towards uncomfortable areas because I don't want to be afraid of any part of myself, and any afraid of our part of the human experience. And, again, as somebody who I consider myself a storyteller, and I know lots of native stories from where I'm from and around. Our stories, man, they covered everything. They were funny, they were dark, they were, coyote stories and raven stories are insane. Like they go to dark places, and it's because you have to be a whole human being. Like that's part of being indigenous. That's part of being. That's why I think a lot of people call themselves like the people, is because you have to explore all parts of being a human being, and like in that performance kind of space of like that I grew up in the village in Alaska. One of the things I love about Athabascan people in particular is when we have like a funeral, a potlatch. A potlatch is like the ceremony that you have for lots of different things, but you have a potlatch at a funeral. And in a funeral, like in the Western context, it's very, you go somewhere, somebody says some words, you guys cry, you put the person to rest, and then you all go about your way. Maybe you have a wake. But potlatches tend to be 3 days, and people from all over come, and you feed each other, and you sing songs, and you tell stories, and you cry, and you laugh, and people, people hook up, people make mistakes, people make lifelong friendships, people take care of each other. and it's normal to see people dancing at 3 a.m. and people weeping at the same time. And because like there is no separation of the experience, there's a container for it all. And like that is, you know, I think with Indigenize Productions specifically, what I have kind of accidentally created for myself and hopefully other people is like a container to be silly, to be sexy, to be smart, to be funny, to be dancing, to be whatever it is. And yeah, I think that's, I mean, it's not about writing anymore, but it is a part of it. And I'll just say that one day I do have like hopes of like I'm working on a one person sort of, play story thing that I did like a preview of in Juno called, It's Not That Serious, Suicide, Genocide, and the Secret Third Worst Thing. And I hope maybe I would love to like one day maybe make some sort of film or something, and because I like writing and directing and but you know, like again, like I am one of those kinds of people who I just do what feels right and what I want. And I don't have like any express plans. I just do stuff and it's kind of ongoing.
It's so wow. That's actually like you flow into like the next question that's written in such a beautiful way. And thank you so much for all of that. I am just so honored to just flow along on the journey with you in the way that you tell these stories and weave them together. You mentioned you have an all-native erotic art installation at Vermilion. And so could you share more about the inspiration behind that project? You did a little bit, but and what you hope viewers will take away from that experience.
Yeah, so it's Native Heritage Month, and I kind of hate Native Heritage Month, you know, because we shouldn't have to have a month, right? Like we should, and a lot of it is so performative, and a lot of it's like very land acknowledgement-y, and like, you know, if you read my writing, I also do like some critiques of stuff, and people don't always like that. But I wrote this piece called Your Land Acknowledgement a while back. So again, sorry for the editors. But I wrote this piece about that, and around that same time is when I was trying to do that variety show where I could find trying to find a native erotic piece to write for somebody to read. That was pre-pandemic. I can't remember when that was, 2018, 2019, something like that. And I wrote those pieces not knowing if they'd be any good because I've never done it. And just wanting to read something and I was going to have somebody else read it, but I ended up doing the reading because the person that was going to do it had to drop, unfortunately. And so doing it, I was shocked at like the response of the audience, and I'm really happy to say that the Indigenize audience is primarily Native, and then other Indigenous folks and people of color. And the response from the audience was really great. People were really into it in a way that I was surprised again, because like there is a lot of stigma around Native people being sexualized, right? Everything from like the Land O'Lakes butter lady on her knees, the maiden, you know, to like the savage Indian and all this stuff. And so I wasn't sure how it'd be received, and especially with our, you know, like we do have issues of being over sexualized, and that they totally link into MMIW stuff. And so I wasn't sure what the response would be, and it was profoundly overwhelming in a way that I people really liked it, wanted to hear more. And so I was like, I think I just kind of filed that away as like, I would love one day to do an all Native, all Indigenous erotic show, whatever that means. And that was pre-pandemic, and actually a friend of mine whose work is featured in the couple of their poems are featured in this exhibit. KB, who I met in Hawaii at the time, but now lives in Montana. We had tried to put something together and it didn't quite work out. And so I just kind of put it on the back burner, you know, the world fell apart and I wasn't sure about what to do. And November was coming up, and last November, I think I did like 5 or 6 events in Seattle, and like it was all great. A burlesque show. We started doing burlesque shows, and I'll say, as somebody who's usually doesn't get stage fright, doing burlesque was terrifying, for hundreds and hundreds of reasons. But you know, not least of which is like growing up very conservatively Christian in Alaska, uh, and just being like, wow, like how is this going to go over in this city? You know, and it was so great. And I'll say too, like it was kind of, I had this weird fight energy. I felt like I was going to get in a fight, like, but it was like just very exciting, and it was super fun. And you know, and whenever I do these things, like, you know, it is interesting to be like somebody who's one of the first or one of the only ones at the time doing the thing, like doing an Indigequeer party, doing all native burlesque shows. Because the reality is that Native people are doing these things. Indigenous people are doing these things. There are, and usually most of the times we're the first ones. Like, you know, it shouldn't be surprising to hear that I've made a circus film when Native people were some of the first circus people in the States. You know, my ancestors literally were tightrope walkers. And like, and, you know, and magicians were Native people, and like, and burlesque, I don't think is any different. That there has been an indigenous history in there that whole time. And so like, you know, one of the top burlesque performers in the world is a Mohawk, Lulu Duchess from Canada. And she's incredible. And so when I did this first Native burlesque show, I was worried that it would be like me and one other person. And there were other Native burlesquers in Seattle. And I was like, well, amazing. Like, where have you been? But thank God you're here. Let's do this. And it is, I mean, how do I express, again, we're like, it's all centered around freedom, but like when you're colonially suppressed for, gender, right? Which we are, like, for gender and sexuality and like, and that there's so many issues around like MMIW and things like this. I think that finding freedom in your body is especially hard. It is because your body is literally colonized, literally. Like, you are forced to participate in a world that shouldn't even exist. You know, like every day that I have to get up and walk and put on my shoes and walk on concrete and take a bus to a whatever or a car, that does something, you know, and it inhibits the freedom that we once had. And so taking that back and through whatever way you want to express it in your body is really important. And I think, like, I can just speak for myself as somebody who was assigned male at birth and, you know, grew up, every now and again getting in some fisticuffs and like being told to be like that I had to be a strong man, had to be a protector, and like, all these things, like expressing my body in a way that wasn't physically confrontational or protecting was, really foreign. And doing that, like, in expressing my way in a way that was desirable, and desirable not in a masculine way, and like in a whatever I am way, really just like, I didn't know that I was colonized in my body in that way. You know, I don't know how to explain it. I didn't know. And I think that, like, by following the lead of some of these other Native folks that do these things, like, and watching the way that they express themselves through dance and burlesque, I've seen that there is like a special place for freedom in your movement in your body, and that can only be, I mean, there's a reason that dancing is such a big part of all of our cultures. And so, you know, I think I found that, like, while that is also probably like where I've received the most controversy, because it's like, I'm a visibly like trans Native person, doing these things. Like, It is also the one where I found a lot of my own self-expression come through in a way that I didn't expect. And so I just wanted to see a native erotic installation. I just wanted to see that because as far as I can tell, I don't know if there's ever been one, like an all native, like installation at a gallery of like different art, put together by a native person, put together, and so I couldn't tell if that even existed. And like, yeah, like, you know, I wrote kind of a tongue-in-cheek piece, not piece, like description for the gallery, where I say, like, I could say basically all these things I was just saying. I could say, like, you know, like that we're pushing back on colonial standards and we're pushing back on blah, blah, blah. But also I just wanted to do fun things with my friends. Like, I just wanted to do like a fun erotic installation with my friends. And like, that's also a big part of it, is like, because, you know, the more I express my freedom, the less I have to push back on the colonial, like, pressures I feel, the more, and, you know, you create more space. And then with that space, I can just have fun. And so I think that's like also a big part of it. It's about play. It's about fun. It's about expressing, silliness and sexiness and desire and eroticism. And one of my, favorite, visual artist in Seattle, Satay. He has some of his illustrated pieces of work up. They're so good. And he's like, "What kind of bio do you want?" I was like, "You can write whatever you want." And so he just wrote this simple sentence. I don't think I have it verbatim in my head, but it basically says, like, you know, I'm tired of as a native artist, people telling me what native art should be. And if I want to make sexy things, if I want to draw sexy, that's what I'm going to do. Like, and I really love that. It feels like it captures what I'm trying to do there, which is like express just this is what I want. This is what I want to do. I'm not, you know, there are lots of, certainly there's lots of, things to push back on, but also like, I don't always have to be doing that, and I can just express joy and fun while I'm doing it. And, yeah, I don't know. I'll just as like a last little piece about it too, because like, also it's weird to be doing it in this time where it's or not weird. I have thought a lot about doing an erotic installation in this time, where things are especially dark and hopeless, you know, with like, the genocide in Palestine. And, you know, I think I've asked myself a couple times, like, you know, like, is this the right time? Is it appropriate to do this in this moment? And again, I went back to what I grew up with in the village and remembered that, like, being a human means that you are a complete person, right? It's one of the ways that you remove colonial pressures from your brain and mind is by expressing yourself as you genuinely are. And like, when there is, again, like I said, when there's a funeral, people hook up. People, you know, it's not like sexy things don't happen. It's not like people don't cry. It's not like all this doesn't happen. And in a time where there's a lot of grief, it is actually important to remember that there are other things, I think. Yeah. And so that's just, I don't know. I think that's just one of the many reasons I've been excited about doing this installation, which, by the way, is a quick little plug. I paid for it all myself, and it wasn't the cheapest thing in the world. And so, if people want to Venmo, they can check out Indigenize Productions and support the work. That'd be great.